Please pray with me. Gracious God, may the meditations of my mouth and the meditations of all our hearts be a pleasing offering to you, O God, our rock and our Redeemer. Amen. Well, we are now in the season of Easter. It is a time of celebration in the church. We're back to using the color white, which you'll see every Sunday until we hit Pentecost. Our liturgy during this time is celebratory. Our texts all talk about the early church's experiences of the risen Christ. And this is all exciting stuff. But what if we don't feel quite so excited? What if the old stories just don't resonate with the same power this time around? We have good days, we have bad days, and sometimes that happens. Maybe we're struggling with financial problems or health or mental well-being or family problems. Maybe we haven't seen the risen Christ in the flesh, so to speak, like the disciples did. Maybe we're feeling discouraged, or maybe our faith, we fear, is wavering. Maybe even hope itself seems distant at best, or even just plain lost. What can these texts do for us under those circumstances? How can these old stories still bring us good news even in the depths of darkness and despair? Our reading for today continues with the Easter story from the Gospel of Luke. Last week we read about the empty tomb found by the women and how the other disciples failed to believe them. We read about how the powers of this world sought to block God's work by ending Jesus' life. But God wasn't having that. Today we read about two disciples, one named Cleopas, who are leaving Jerusalem that same day and headed to their hometown of Emmaus. This is a story found only in the Gospel of Luke. The other disciple is never named, but a number of scholars suspect that the disciple was actually Cleopas's wife. That would make them a married couple, walking together, discussing events. As they are walking home, they are defeated, they are broken. Their hopes for God's redemption, which rested on the belief that Jesus would defeat the Romans, has been dashed to pieces. New Testament professor Jennifer Peets points out how helpful this passage is to us because it lets us know that it's okay to sit with that grief, to sit with that disappointment. It's okay to take time to work through that pain. But suddenly the two disciples are joined by a stranger. In truth, it's the risen Jesus, but they are kept from recognizing him. They tell him about how their hearts are broken by Jesus' death. Notice that they mention that they had hoped he was the one to redeem Israel, implying that they no longer hope that. They describe Jesus using similar language to how John the Baptist is described earlier in the Gospel, a prophet mighty in deed and in word. Demonstrates, unfortunately, that they still didn't know who Jesus was. He wasn't just a prophet, he was the Messiah. Now, incognito, Jesus then tells them they're being foolish and runs through the scriptures, demonstrating that the Messiah should suffer and die before entering glory. This story kind of mirrors the story of the women at the tomb with the two angels. Instead of an angel here, however, it is the risen Jesus himself conversing with them. But it isn't until they sit down at table with Jesus and he takes the bread, blesses it and breaks it, that they recognize him. Yes, there is very obvious communion liturgy language here going on. Once they recognize Jesus, he disappears. And they race back to Jerusalem to reconnect with the 11 and the others, to tell them what has happened. And they note that as Jesus was speaking with them, their hearts were burning within This passage gives us a neat little summary of how faith works inside of us, how it comes to be. We see some examples of how faith comes into our lives. We come to faith through a community. We come to faith through interactions with the risen Christ. We come to faith through the hearing of the scriptures preached. And of course, we come to faith through the Lord's Supper. These boxes are all checked in today's reading. Now, the point I want to make today is that it is okay to be discouraged. It's also okay not to get this faith thing right all the time. These disciples were people who knew Jesus of Nazareth, and they didn't get it, and they felt incredibly discouraged. They saw all their hopes and dreams evaporate on that cross. The future that they had envisioned for themselves and their nation was gone. They felt lost. They felt like they were without faith, without hope. In fact, they had just decided to leave the Jesus community and go home. It shows you just how discouraged they were. They were still living under the shadow of Good Friday. Sure, Jesus had already risen from the dead, but they didn't know that. They couldn't have believed that at this point. Easter hadn't arrived for them yet. But the good news for them and for us is just like how the powers that be couldn't keep Jesus in the grave, our own ability to have faith and our own inability to understand doesn't limit God either. Because in the deepest, darkest pit, God's light still shines down there. I know that can be hard to believe sometimes. We look around and see only pain and suffering. We see injustice. We see cruelty. We see hatred. Perhaps we even have horrific struggles of a more personal nature to deal with. But the good news is that God has many tools to reach us. There is the community of faith, as I was mentioning to the kids. There is the living presence of Jesus Christ himself. There's the scriptures that testify to the works of God. And of course, the sacraments, the Lord's Supper. These means of grace, to use the old Reformed term, nurture us. They grow our faith. They increase our understanding. And that good news brings us comfort and peace. Because no matter how dark things might seem, no matter how lost we might feel, those means of grace remain. We have the community. We have the risen Christ. We have the scriptures. We have the Lord's Supper. And those real things give us something to hold on to, no matter how much we are struggling. That realization gives us peace and brings us comfort. It gives us the confidence that we need to live our lives as God would have us live them. It gives us what we need to be the people that love boldly. It gives us what we need to be the people that stand for justice and peace. It gives us the confidence to be the people that oppose darkness and bigotry and injustice. Through this powerful means of grace, despair and hopelessness can lead to comfort and peace, which can lead to confidence and courage. Just as it came to the disciples, it can come to us. This story from so long ago can seem so distant because it doesn't quite mesh well with our own experience. Most of us have not had a walking down the road experience where Jesus appears and talks to us and calls us fools. We may have thought that that might have happened a few times, but most of us have not actually had that experience. So it's easy to read these stories and think, well, that's kind of interesting, but that's so far removed from me. What does that have to do with me? Well, what it has to do with you and I is to let us know that no matter how dark things are, no matter how despaired we get, no matter how depressed we feel, no matter how overwhelming this world can seem, that God has provided us lifelines, the means of grace, the community, the risen Christ, the scriptures, the sacraments. All of these things exist for us all the time to help us, no matter how dark things are. We always have those very tangible things that we can cling to. And thanks to that, we can live the kind of lives that God would want us to live. Not ones of despair and hopelessness, but ones of comfort and peace, which leads us to confidence and the courage to be the kind of people that God would have us be. So as you go out this week, I want you to be thinking about that. How the darkness and despair of the Good Friday moment can hold sway over us. And yet, even in the midst of that, that Easter light can break through to us through all these special means of grace that God has left for us and gives us.